sitting in the truck going into town to get my hair cut, and I realised that we had just been given a $530 million verdict.
An Australian inventor.
A Sydney-born IT entrepreneur.
Ric Richardson here, very successful inventor.
Aussies like you make me proud to be Aussie.
I've got software on 2.5 billion machines. It's solved this immense problem. I don't know whether it's an Australian thing, you just have a go to honour that instinct. When IBM picked us up, I go over there and speak to the VP. What just happened? He said they've spent $35 million and they're only about a third of the way to what you just showed him. He just says, get everybody in the meeting room. He just leaves the room.
How did you come to know that Microsoft had pinched your IP?
There it is in black and white. They're doing what the patent says. And I'm going, please, they must be doing something different. They can't be doing this. With its Microsoft, you really have to think it through what you're going to do.
Guys, the pod that you're about to watch, I think is... What do you think, James? You agree?
Without a doubt, the best pod we've had so far. Mind blown. I think I've just met a modern day Einstein.
Eric, are you the same?
Honestly.
Yeah, next level, right?
Unreal. I'm just so grateful to have you on. It's just been really incredible. Cool. We could have kept going.
Yeah, we've done past, was it 2.5 hours now? I feel like we're just getting started. So
yeah, we could have kept going. But guys, this interview is with one of Australia's least known but highly successful inventors, I would say, and entrepreneurs. Ric Richardson. He's from northern New South Wales. It's the incredible tale of how he patented some very, very clever intellectual property, ended up taking on Microsoft in the early 90s. He invented the patent and ended up settling with Microsoft and was awarded a judgment of 530 million Australian dollars. But this podcast is far, far more than just a financial settlement and a fancy story. It really speaks to the heart of Australian culture, entrepreneurship, what it takes to be successful. It's just a wide-ranging conversation that I know you are going to absolutely love. So if there's a tinkerer in you, if there's an entrepreneur in you, if there's any part of the Aussie spirit in you, this is a podcast you're going to enjoy. And guys, stay right to the end, because at the most unexpected moment, the podcast takes a turn and then it takes another turn, and Ric casually tells you a story that will floor you all the way to the end. So enjoy, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Hey there, here's a fun but sad fact for us. Most people who love our content are still not subscribed to the channel. Now, here's the deal that I will make with you. If you can find it in your heart to click on the little subscribe button below, I promise you that we will get better and better guests on this show so that we can interview them for you to give you better and deeper insights from people that have really done some crazy good stuff. And I promise you that we'll be working harder than ever to make this show even better for you. So that's the deal. If you click on that little subscribe button, hit the notifications bell as well, we would be deeply grateful, and we'll make a better show for you going forward. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Unemployable. Today, we have an extremely special podcast for you. When I think of our guest today, we are really, I know that he would hate me saying this because he's so grounded and Aussie, but we are very, very fortunate to have, I would describe an Aussie treasure in a genuine way. You know, in the I don't know how to describe Ric, because you've been on the Australian Story on the ABC twice. One of the most viewed Australian stories ever to run on the ABC. Mm-hmm. He's kind of along the lines of someone like Ben Lexon in your design sentiment and I think groundedness. You've been an extremely successful entrepreneur. But you guys, lock yourselves in for this one. Give it time. Give yourself time to really tune into this, because this story, when I saw it, captured me as an Australian on so many levels. If you're a tinkerer, if you've got that Aussie, hills hoist sort of inventor in you, at some level, you're going to love this. If you're an entrepreneur of any kind, you're going to love this. If you're an Aussie that likes the underdog stories, if you are of the generation that I've interviewed John Bertram before, and the thing about the Australia 2 was that if you ask in surveys still to this day, the number one most memorable Australian sporting moment for Australians is the Australia 2 story. If you like the Australia 2 story and that Aussie spirit, this story of Ric has all of those things embedded, taking on Microsoft, the big American, and winning, and he's just a good bloody guy. So Ric Richardson, welcome to the pod. How you doing?
I'm a bit worried now. What are you guys going to expect from me?
Oh, mate, we're just so grateful to have you here because, you know, you've got such an epic story and
Thanks,
you're
mate.
such a grounded dude. When we spoke on the phone, like I reached out to Chris, who's here with you today, and it's funny how this came about because I took a meeting I try to leave a few meetings a week just open to people on the up.
Right.
And he said, have you heard of Ric Richardson? I said, I haven't heard of Ric Richardson.
Yeah.
He described you as a mentor to him. And he flicked me your website and I looked it up and I thought, what the heck, I'll email and see if you'd want to come on the show. And then 20 minutes later, I emailed Chris. 20 minutes later, I got a pod saying, yeah, Ric could be able to do it. Here's his mobile. And I was like, really? It was just amazing to me.
Oh, mate, no, Australians, it's like there's Bill Bryson wrote a book about Australia, the sunburned country, and he said, like you can go into a mall in Melbourne and find an ex-Prime Minister selling a book on a card table. You know, Australians don't have airs about themselves, so...
Yeah.
And that's I really loved coming home to that, just... Be normal, know.
The minute the ABC, that Australian story, when I watched it, the opening sequence of that story, and these guys have both watched it in the last few days, they hadn't heard of you either.
Yeah.
Seeing you sitting in the back of I think it's a Sprinter van, in the van,
Yeah.
and you're sitting there and on the beach in Byron, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. For those who are watching, imagine a Sprinter van sitting on the beachfront of Byron and Ric in the back on a office chair and a fold-down, humble little desk doing drawings. And then that's really what you like to do.
Yeah, and Bob McTavish, who did the intro right in the beginning of that, very dear friend and a great Australian, and actually a mad inventor himself. I'd known him since I was a teenager. And he didn't know anything about the Microsoft situation. And when he said, "Oh, whoa," I had no idea that's how he felt. But to get him on national TV going, "Whoa, Ric," that's kind of, it hit me more then than actually hearing about the news,
Yeah. So. It's an amazing story, and we will dive into it. And I can only imagine, for you yourself, when that decision came down and the equivalent of $530 million ruling in your favour, I imagine by the time that actually came down, it was just like, what was it? A mixed sense of, I can't believe it's over. I don't think looking at you it would have been, wow, we're off and going to buy a yacht. Like, it's just been such a long fight.
I'll be honest, because I was the only guy in the room, often with 35 shareholders, I was the only guy that had the job of saying hell no, right, to any settlement offer until it was until we actually did settle. I was so used to the idea that we were going to lose that when we won, my body just went on and had a kind of a failure reaction without me. So I'm sitting in the truck going into town to get my hair cut, and I just realised that we had just, been given a $530 million verdict. And what am I doing? I'm going in to have a haircut in Byron by myself. I hadn't even spoken to the lawyers or my business partner or anything. And it was more about the relief of not losing, and which is really sad, come on. But in fact, the main reason that I got to enjoy it is by watching other people react to it. But, 9 years of waiting to get bad news actually has more of an effect on you than people expect. So even though most of the people that know me closely, they can kind of relate to the good news, The fact is that, you know, in my world, it was all about, this is such a big risk. You're going up against such an incredible force. And you also have to be responsible about that too. So you can't demonize Microsoft. You know, I actually know a lot of the guys at Microsoft personally, and it turns out that there were individuals that didn't do the right thing at Microsoft. But, you know, there's tens of thousands of employees there. You can't demonize the whole lot. An interesting thing happened that my parents live next door to a senior exec from Microsoft, and Dad didn't know whether to say hello to them or anything, you know, because I didn't know how much tension there'd be. Yeah. And it was really funny because when it did come up in conversation finally, you realise that even Microsoft guys are Australians first. So the next door neighbour said, if they did the wrong thing, so be it. Good on you, Rick, you know. Yeah. And so you realise that people actually do appreciate common sense, and you do appreciate that most of the people at Microsoft are really trying to do the right thing. And in fact, there's so many people trying to go after their money that you kind of got to empathise with their situation, but you can't let it take away from your determination to do the right thing by my shareholders and by everybody, including my family, my friends who supported, you know, the project right up until we got that, you know, eventual settlement.
Can I just dive in there, and if I've got this right, I know we're probably going to dig into the story a bit more, that you actually had that feeling of winning twice, like that was got overruled, and then you had to go for a second bite of the cherry, or the apple, so to speak?
Yeah, no, people don't realise that when you go up against a big corporation, a big enterprise like that, and you're dealing with anything over 120 million, if you're going for anything more than 120 million, you cannot assume you're going to settle because they make more money out of the interest of keeping the money in the bank than they do in spending to fight you, right? And the biggest headache for Microsoft was not the payout. The biggest headache for them was actually the restriction on the 800 million that they had to put aside in the case that we went for damages and everything, right? So, you know, there's a lot of things that happen in the background that you can't measure. It's not real obvious how it works. So from the word go, we had to behave as if we were going all the way to the Supreme Court, which is in lawyer expense, it's about 25 million US. It's probably more than that now, but back then it was about 25 mil. So we only really needed to find a contingency and expert budget of about 25 to 35 mil, to work it out. So you really are thinking with the resources you're going up against, you really are going to the Supreme Court because everybody's going to argue with you. So it actually caught us a bit off guard when a decent, settlement offer came through, which I apologise for not being able to say, but Microsoft asked us to not talk about it, and you got to remember that they're now my biggest customer.
Yes, yes.
So you got to honour your customer. And also I got to meet a lot of the people from Microsoft over the years, so even though their lawyers are, pretty ferocious, there's no love lost there, but, I'm sure they'd laugh about it now. But when you're sitting in 3 days of deposition with 4 lawyers going after you, it's pretty tough.
You did say on the Australian Story the settlement that you ultimately reached was better than that number, but over on terms.
Yeah, no, it turns out that we set our criteria of what minimum we were going to be able to put up with, and we reached what we wanted to. It's a combination too, because there's roll-on effect with the other cases that we went straight into. So, if we got our pound of flesh from Microsoft, but then shared some of that pound of flesh with Microsoft because we went after, everybody else in the industry, that, it worked out the best deal for us.
Yeah. One of the things that just struck me so profoundly and why I was so excited to have you on the pod. I mean, the pod is called Unemployable, and it's about helping real people, change their lives for the better. Was underscoring real people, seeing you and your wife talk about the implication of money in your life and seeing the chicken coop and how your missus just wanted a better chicken coop and that was about it.
Yeah.
One statement you made really struck me. Well, I wasn't sure it was her or you that said we were happy before we had the money and we weren't going to let money change us.
Yeah.
And you've had to implement rules around how you deal with that kind of money. Can you talk about that? Like, what's that been like? We'll get into the Unilock story, but I'd love to, how do you deal with $500 million sort of size of, however that's structured?
Yeah.
That's an enormous event.
Well, actually, I've got to give that credit to my missus because that's the way she thinks. And I think that too, because being in business, you have to use resources to leverage it. But in terms of personal life, she made the expression, you can only drive one car and you can only live in one house at a time. But we made the decision very early that the motivation can't come from, getting a multi-million dollar settlement. It has to come from the doing the right thing. Getting people to do the right thing, and the morality of having a patent and not turning your back on it, especially when the patents cost about $800,000 in the end, and my parents were the first ones to help with that, and they helped with $40,000 initially, which is the equivalent back in '92 of a big deposit on a house. So. If you treat it like a big money grab, you're trivialising what they did, right? And I think that's also a very kind of Australian thing to not be it all about you and all about the money. It's about all the people that, got in and they had no idea what a patent was. They didn't know what software activation was. I remember explaining it to my family and they'd kind of glaze over. I got good at explaining it because I had to explain it to 20 people, and it's quite complicated stuff. And in the end, everyone knows how to do it. And it's so obvious, and every person that has 2 cents to put together about what they think of it, they all act as if this is so obvious we should never have got a patent for it. But in '92, it was magic.
And I think that's a big thing to remember. Like this, when was the settlement? What year?
I think it was 2012.
Yeah, back when $500 million was a lot of money. That's 10 years ago, right? Like it's amazing. But it started well before then. So yeah, I think that's really powerful. Is the why right behind why you sued? I remember Taylor Swift writing to Apple when Apple asked all musicians to forgo their royalties for 3 months to help them launch the App Store. And it was all going swimmingly for Apple. They'd convinced everybody until Taylor Swift got off stage one night and thought, I don't think this is fair. I don't go to an Apple store and ask them to give me a free iPhone. Sure, I'm a rich artist, but most artists are broke and struggling and singing every night in empty rooms, and you're asking all of us to pay for the launch of your new streaming service? No. And she put it on her blog, and the next day it was panic stations at Apple HQ because they realised the power of Taylor Swift, and ultimately because of one letter written from that place of protecting the rights of everyone who invents or everybody who creates. I think it was estimated at $3 or $4 billion in royalties that ended up in musicians' pockets, as opposed to Apple's using them to fund they were the last company in the world that needed funding from struggling artists. So I really resonate with that.
Yeah, something interesting about that, like I had a very specific job at Unilock being the inventor. So even though I personally could have doubts, my job in terms of in the Unilock team and amongst the the shareholders and everybody was to be the hellman, It's like, damn. Until my business partner said, Rick, this is it, I was full on, like, hard charging. Actually, there's two moments in my memory that are real hard charging like that, besides doing some stupid things as a kid. There was that moment where we committed with to go after Microsoft, and you can't do that half-hearted. If you're putting together 20 mil a package, 25 mil package, and you're committing 35 shareholders and everything to that, and you're representing all the people that, backed you up, and all the people that are using the technology as well, right? Then, but the other time was I was out the front of my of a party in Little Narrabeen, sitting in the gutter, because I was finding it really hard to just have fun, because a dear friend of mine who's a lawyer said, Rick, you really ought to patent this. I don't think anyone in the world has done this. And you're kind of doing the Australian thing of, really? No one in the world has done this before? What a big head to think that you can, walk around with a badge that says you're the only guy in the world that's done this, And so I'm sitting there and I'm going, I'm going to spend 40 grand of my parents' money. I could do a deposit on a house with this. What the hell am I thinking? So I got up to go back in and just relax, Rick, go and have some fun, hang out with some friends. And then I thought, I don't want to be 10 years later and realise that I didn't have a go. And I'd be such a gutless wonder to look back in 10 years' time and think, what the hell? Like you saw it, but you didn't have the guts to make that move. And so it's funny, I don't know whether it's an Australian thing or not, but you just kind of have to have a go to honour, that instinct that you have. And it's not about ego, it's just about not being gutless. That sounds so...
No, it's absolutely phenomenal. Look, I think there's a lot of listeners that we need to bring into the picture here, and they're thinking, what did he invent? So let's go there. So let's tell the Unilock story of how it started, your trip, your venture over to the US, but. Where did it begin? Like, what is Unilock? What is the invention that you came up with that ultimately is the crux of all of this?
I used to be in the music industry, and I was a computer music specialist in places like Albert Studios, which is where Akadaka and the Angels and everything, they were all in Albert's productions.
Where are they?
It's in Mossman. It's a studio.
In Sydney.
And there was a Fairlight there that I used to... automate with the Mac. So I was known as a computer music specialist. And on a trip to the US, I got the rights to some music sequencing software and started to publish some music sequencing software. And during that process, I realized that distribution was a real nightmare. Software distribution was a real nightmare. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could give everybody a free copy and then they could use it in a limited way and then get it unlocked when they pay for it. Because musicians, you really don't want to charge musicians until they know they have to pay for it. And even then you want to be generous with them, because musos never have any money. So, And so I started really throwing myself into solving that problem, and I looked at burning holes in floppy disks and all kinds of contraptions. And then I came up with the idea of fingerprinting a computer to try and work out what characteristics of a computer can tag it as being unique, and then link a serial number to that machine, so that over the phone I could get the serial number and get the fingerprint number and lock them two together and give them an unlock code that would only work for that machine, right? And so I went into an Apple store in North Sydney and I got three Macs that were pretty much in the same series number, serial numbers besides, because they'd come off the manufacturing line. And so I put some utilities in and started looking at various things on the machine, and they're all so different, like different CPU characteristics, different modem settings, Apple Talk settings, all kinds of things were different. And I suddenly realized that I was onto something. So I went to Apple asking the head of developer services about, this. And he said to me point blank, he said, Macs are all the same. And I just knew, Australian thing. No, they aren't. Anything made by a man is different. It's just you need to look closely enough. And so I started working out how to do it, then started with a patent and filed, and then got an engineer to actually build it into the software. And
this is in the 90s, right? In the early 90s?
This is 90. This all happened within about 2 months. From then to actually filing the patent, it was only about 2 months from the research coming to fruition to... I'd probably been experimenting for a year, but the actual discovery of the fingerprinting is about 2 months before I got into the filing of the patent. And then within a week of that finishing, I had an engineer working on it. I got it to work for my software. I thought, this is great. And then we were tinkering around. We worked out there was a program back then called PageMaker. You might have heard of it. It's famous. Yeah, Adobe bought it. But we worked out, how could you do it to PageMaker? And then we dropped something. They were in a package called a suitcase back then, and we could drop the code into a PageMaker suitcase, and it started to work. So I actually went and did a demo of PageMaker for the board of Apple Australia and showed them a try and buy version of PageMaker working, and they were just shocked. They thought, how did you get access to the source code of this thing? Like, it looks as if we've modified the code. We didn't just drop something in over the top of it. So they thought there was some real bad shenanigans happening, but also try and buy. That was the first time they'd ever seen try and buy. And so what everybody knows is software activation, which is Microsoft stopping people from taking a copy of Windows from one machine to another, started out as try and buy. And so
you could use it for a certain period of time, or you could listen to a certain number of tracks. Yeah.
Back then, we started off with inability to save. So we shut down the save function and then re-enabled it when someone paid. But, the time bomb came pretty quickly after that. And time bombs were used in the past, but...
you mean it's valid for a certain period and then after that it locks? Well,
yeah, but without the machine locking, you couldn't actually move machine to machine. So, this enabled me to get a floppy, make a copy of a floppy, give it to someone. So you could go to a trade show with 100 floppies and just give everyone floppies for the first time. And everybody goes, what? We've got Mac software on here. It's a sequencer. Fantastic. And I can use it for 30 days. Didn't need to send 100 packages out to retail stores and try and have them buy the software. So within 6 months, IBM had picked us up. It was so exciting when IBM picked us up because I just remember this situation. We were in Boulder, Colorado. That IBM Australia was very interested. I didn't know what was going on. Then they said, look, we need you to fly over to Boulder, Colorado to talk to the guys in software manufacturing over there. I go over there and speak to the VP of manufacturing, and I have an unlocking centre at the MasterCard authorisation centre in Sydney, $8,000 a month. It was so expensive. But it was 24 hours and you could get an unlock code 24 hours a day.
Just call up.
Yeah. So it was, instead of the internet, it was, here's a series of numbers, here's your credit card details, here's your address, and this is how you can get your unlock. And the VP, they had like 2 Macs in the whole facility, and I did a demo in front of him, and he goes, this is a demo, right? And I said, yeah, but you have to ring Australia to get the unlock code. And he says, who am I calling? And I said, oh, it's the MasterCard Fulfillment Centre in Sydney. And he goes, are they going to be awake now? And I said, yeah. He says, so I'm actually unlocking software now. And I said, yeah. And then he unlocks the software, and I made $35, great. And then he goes, puts it in the next and uses the same code, it didn't work. And he had an engineer looking over his shoulder. And then the next one was a different code, he rings up again. I said, another $35. And I'm talking to a guy who's running the Boulder facility, you know, like there's a few thousand people there. Anyway, he just says, get everybody in the meeting room. He just leaves the room and says, it gets everybody in the meeting room. And then the guy who was looking after me, holding my hand, you know, through the facility and everything, I said, what just happened? He said, they've spent $35 million trying to do unlockable software with CDs. And they're only about a third of the way to what you just showed him. He said they're dumbfounded. They have no idea how you pulled this off. And so, like, that moment in North Narrabeen kind of went, oh, sometimes you are lucky. Sometimes you're not faking it. That's the problem with being an Aussie. Most of the time you're convinced you're faking it.
Mate, hearing this story, I think here and now we're going to rename our kangaroo. We haven't found a name yet, but I think we're going to call it Ric.
Absolutely.
In honour of you.
Because no, it's a bit thin to be me.
That kangaroo, I'm not even joking, because that is such an epic story. I mean, that's the stuff of... This is a movie. Like, how is this not a movie yet?
If you call Kaz... she'll say, call it Dick.
Yeah. Like your
she calls me Dick all the time. She's the only person that's allowed to call me Dick.
That's
funny. But, because Dick Richardson,
yeah,
Richard Richardson, come on, it's
yeah.
so irritating, and she knows it irritates me so much. But, if anybody wants to get away with blue murder, they try and pull that on me, and she's the only one that I can't have any say over it. She just runs me over.
What a feeling that must have been. Like an Aussie dude in Boulder, Colorado, with the heads of IBM.
But not just like any Aussie, like you. Like, you're like, do you know what I mean? Like, you're not some wanker. Like, you're a freaking Aussie. Yeah. You're an Aussie.
Thanks.
In the belly of the beast. And just blowing their freaking mind.
And you've just demolished IBM's tech team.
without realizing it, though, right? Asking the question, going, what just happened? You actually...
Have you seen
right
Tetris, the movie Tetris?
No.
You must watch Tetris.
Yeah, okay.
Honestly. You've seen Tetris on Apple?
Yes, great
You
movie.
must watch Tetris. And it's the story of the Tetris game.
Oh, yeah.
And it just engenders that same deep feeling of the guy who invented Tetris. But, yeah, what a story.
Yeah.
What a story.
The problem with being an inventor is that when you solve a problem, you're kind of like in this noddy land where you don't know whether what you've done is real or not, because it was so easy for you. It's weird to explain, but sometimes problems get solved so quickly, it's such a non-event, that you're actually more concerned that you just haven't thought of something, some problem, right?
Does it feel that when you're working on these inventions, because I know you work on multiple of them, do you feel like everyone else is working on them as well?
Yeah, well, like when in 2002 to 2003, when the whole litigation thing came up, I was so confident that there must be 100 ways to do what I was doing, which is a typical Australian thing because we're at the edge of the world and everybody's doing stuff. despite us, the large reason that we have to solve problems is because we're so far away from everything that we should just, if we're going to do it, we might as well just get on and fix it, right? But sometimes you get this surprise and you find out that, no, you're the only ones that's done it. And that's
Australians are famous for that, right? Like a lot of Aussies don't realise how many major inventions have come out of our country.
Yeah, and it's really, and it's a weird thing. I got a bit of a soapbox about it, but like, I'll tell you a story. I'm with the Australian Motor Winders Association at Twin Cities here, and they had 300 in the audience, and they wanted to hear from an inventor, the guy in Australian Story, and then I got up in front of them and I said, "How many of you are inventors?" And none of them put their hands up, right? And so I said, "Okay, how many of you have got patents?" And out of 300, there was 40, right? And I'm going, well, so what did you invent? Who's the inventor? What did you put in there, right? Like, come on, what's going on? Put your hand up. Keep your hand up. Now, how many of you have a secret contraption at your workplace, in your garage, that makes your job a lot easier, and it would be really good if everyone didn't know about it. It gives you a critical advantage. And then everyone else said, put their hand up. I said, yeah, you put your hand up. So who hasn't got one of those? And he says, like there's a handful. And I'm going, get real. You're all inventors. So just repeat after me, you're an inventor.
It is inherent in the human spirit a little bit, isn't it? To sort of look at the world and want to make it a better place somehow,
Yeah, but Australians are peculiar in the fact that the tall poppy syndrome is not just a negative thing. We actually like thinking of each other as being the same, and it actually helps to keep egos in check, right? But the problem is that if you don't celebrate a win like that, you never do have the breakthroughs. That means that someone who could actually have some larger success never realises it, So I actually went through that whole process because of worrying about being not having a go.
So let's jump back to the boardroom in Boulder. So you've just realised you've blown these guys' minds.
Yeah.
These guys as an IBM.
As in IBM. Yeah. Like back in the day. I mean, even now. So you're in Boulder. You're this guy from Australia just blowing their minds. What happens from there? You're living in the US at this point, or
No.
You've
That
just
was
gone over. Dusted off your passport.
That was just to there was an opening to actually get involved with IBM, but they just became our worldwide marketing partner at that time. And we went for 4 years until Lotus was acquired, and they took over, the Lotus guys took over the software manufacturing. They got out of software manufacturing, and I was left high and dry. But up to that time, we were doing like 2,000 sales a day of unlockable software.
So were they paying per install, or you just got a royalty, or how does that work?
Well, IBM had a try and buy program where they sold the try and buy software packages for the cost of the packaging plus a profit margin in all these retail outlets, so people could pick up a copy of WordPerfect and for $10 or something like that, it costs like $3 to manufacture, and then use it for 30 days before so try and buy wasn't easily distributed like it is on CDs and on the internet now. So they were actually making, so to get 2,000 sales, we were actually talking about 1,000, thousands of more actual trials before they got the sale. So, and we used to get, a percentage of those transactions, and also we got paid to do what's called demorizing, which is to turn an existing product into a demo, a try and buy version of the same of the same thing. So when the deal with IBM dried up, the company would die if I didn't go to the States, and that's when I went. But it just turns out that at the same time I was marrying Kaz, and so I went over to do a contract job for News Corp, because News Corp was looking at unlockable books for HarperCollins at the time. So I was actually getting around and speaking to a lot of people, and all the big guys I was talking to. And then I got pneumonia and was stuck in. I'd only been married 2 weeks before I got pneumonia and couldn't fly, and then got home, sat my girl down and said, "We got to move to the States. We'll only go for 3 months." Famous last words. We'll only go for 3 months. I just want to get it established there, see if we can get some funding and everything, and then we'll get home. And it was 8 years before I did my first visit home. It was kind of like a, burn the ships kind of thing. I didn't want to. I knew if I came home and I saw my mum and my dad, my heart would break. So I had to be a hellman from then on and, just commit. So
I like the phrase. You moved to SoCal, right? Southern California?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huntington Beach. There's a lot of Aussies there.
I know.
And the office was in Irvine. And it's a good, John Wayne's just there, so you can fly pretty much anywhere in the States pretty easily from there. So I was all over the place, Dell Computer, across to New York all the time, Chicago, Seattle. Wow. So, yeah.
Where take us to the moment you were in the US. How did you come to know for the first time that Microsoft had pinched your IP?
The Big Four started getting into Microsoft's software activation technology because they were concerned that that Microsoft was collecting private information. And so by law, you can't go into the EULA, which is the end user license agreement of Microsoft's code. So even though I'd had lots of people tell me that they're doing your thing, Rick, I couldn't actually look for myself because there's an end-user license agreement. But in these documents, they started saying what they actually do, and there it is in black and white. They're doing what the patent says. And I'm going, please, they must be doing something different. They can't be doing this thing like... I knew there was some little guys that were doing it, and because they're pretty open about what they did, I thought, I'm going to have to get upset about that, or else you lose your right to speak later on. But if it's Microsoft, you really have to think it through, what you're going to do. And I actually did start with the lawyers that represented Hilton, and right in the middle of that, I ran into who's now my business partner, who ran Unilock. He's upset with me that I left him behind. But Craig Etchigoyen, he's a very dear guy and a very dear friend. And I met him and he goes, let's do this serious. So he got a bidding war started between two big law firms, one in Boston and the other one in LA. And the one in Boston won out. And then, we filed the court case and everything, and it started really serious. And from that moment on, you've got a serious CEO next to me who's actually executing the business. You've got a really great law firm, and so even though they're all pounding me about what happened when I invented it and what documents do I have and what emails do I have to communicate with all of these people, and it's all about going through my underwear, and testing whether I'm the real deal or not, second-guessing everything. really the bulk of the work was done by everybody else. But the determination to do this, you can't afford to have an inventor who's second-guessing himself, right? So, you've got a room full of people looking at you and kind of going, is this real? And you've got, no matter what you think, you've got to go, damn, yes, it is,
And I think that loops back to what you said at the start about your motive, because money will only get you so far. But when you think about your mum and your dad, that will take you all the way.
Yeah.
When you love and respect your parents like that. And I think that having a client like you in that country would have been, in many ways, a dream come true. He is a true blue believer.
Yeah. Interestingly, in the case with Activision, and I was on the stand with the jury there in East Texas, the jury actually had an opportunity to ask their own questions. They asked the judge to ask me the questions, but one of the questions was, did you pay your parents back for the loan? And I've said, of course, like that, and I paid them back. They gave me 40 grand and I paid them back 200 grand, right? Bit of interest. And that was so important to them. And my guys didn't anticipate that. But because a jury is normal people, especially in East Texas, they're just normal people, they're well educated, but they're not connected to high tech at all. There's healthcare and all kind of normal middle class people. They just relate to common sense questions. I was so comfortable there, and it's just, and I think they relate to Australians too.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned before it costs roughly about 20 to 25 million in legals to fight this.
Well, that's what you got to have.
Yeah.
We spent about 16.
16.
14. We spent 14. Microsoft spent about 16.
And how did you fund that? Was that just through the company? Like, did you have enough money in the company that you guys were turning over already that you could fund that internally, or did you have to look at external sources for that?
Well, to run the company up to 2002, I'd raised about 6 mil by myself.
Yeah.
When Craig came in, we raised 8 mil in about 3 months because he's a really spectacular operator.
Yep.
Really fantastic. And then because we had a contingency deal with the Boston mob,
Yep.
so we could bring in funds as needed,
Yep.
but we knew that that's what we ultimately would need to get. And the other thing is you can't blink with your lawyers, because, I've had a lot of people over the years ask me about, how do you engage with lawyers in that situation? Do you negotiate on the contingency rate and all that? But you don't negotiate on that. What you're negotiating is their ceiling of investment. Because if they don't contractually oblige themselves to, 15 million of their own time, lawyer time, right, at least 15 mil, then you're going to get a situation where they hit the cap and they want to leave you high and dry. And that's the worst possible thing, right? You've got to have people that'll commit to the full distance. And that's why if you're going to do anything over 120 mil, you've got to get everybody aligned with that. And so the difference between 30% and 45% is marginal compared to, being left to swim by yourself if you, hit the, the 4 million cap or the 8 million cap. Like, we spent $4 million in discovery before the first court case.
And this is in 2002. Like, this is
And you've got a
22 years
business
ago.
partner that's running the company as CEO while you're full-time running this case.
Well, no, we started out as co-CEOs, and then I watched him actually do real CEO stuff. Like, I was running a 50-person company before he turned up, so I can't be that bad at it. But, when you see a real CEO execute, you realise, oh, shut up.
You make a good inventor.
That's the expression. As a CEO, I'm a really good inventor. And so he, just did all these magic things, the way he'd read people. And I also being able to just concentrate on technology, because I started to invent for the company, he'd do the same thing with me. He said, how the hell did you do that? And I'm going, you're just trying to make me feel better because I'm so bad at being a CEO. And so it started out co-CEOs, and then I went to CTO, and then we find that there's guys better at being a CTO than me. Then I went to, being a scientist, and then I went part-time as a scientist because I wanted to invent other things, So, but Craig is all the business side. I was the kind of determination to make it happen. And there's a lot of time and effort in just the foundation of the case. So I wasn't managing it. He was still managing the case, like managing the lawyers and everything. But I was the one who was flying to Boston they had the source code for Windows on their machine, and they're querying, do you know this person or do you know that person? So they're looking at a computer with, Bill Gates's emails on it and all of these senior execs, and they're searching through and asking me questions. I can't see any of it because it'd be breach of confidentiality. But they're asking me questions about it because they're trying to get my side of the story. So you said this in an email, is that related to this? And so I'd be sitting there for hours, with lawyers. It's until you've actually done it, it's very hard to kind of comprehend.
That'd be tiring.
So you just, you just grit your teeth and go for it. And then suddenly one day it's over. And
Did you ever get to meet Bill to say thanks?
Well, there's been a couple of times since the case was finished that that there was opportunities to meet, and so but it's really I don't think it's appropriate given the fact that anybody who's trying to organise that has got a hidden agenda, either to embarrass him or to cause some kind of confrontation, and that's not the point of it. I think. The other thing is I'm very self-aware of the real motives that I think Bill has, in that there's a famous book called Hard Drive.
I've read it.
Right?
Phenomenal.
Right? And he talks about competing with On Corporation, I think it was, where they went after pen computing. And they did stuff in there that most people would say is immoral by releasing a technology a few days before they were going to go public, right? To kill the pen computing. Excuse me. So you listen to what was said, and you can see somebody saying that that's immoral, but Bill treats Microsoft as if it's his kids. And parents are ferocious about their kids. And parents will defend their kids no end, but if they discipline, they're not going to do it in public. They're going to go home and then rouse on them in the backyard and put their restrictions in. But it's nobody's business, right? So he'll defend his family to no end like that. And he's ferocious that way. And so from actually seeing what actually happened in the court case, there's no way that he actually contributed to a willful stealing, but he is so competitive, he will do everything in his power to protect his baby, right? So in that book, in Hard Drive, it talks about them trying to acquire a version of Unix, where they paid on average 3 times the cost to engineer if there's no patents, and 10 times the cost to engineer if there's patents involved. So in their calculation, if something took 3 man years, 3 men 3 man years, that's 9 man years of engineering cost. They'll pay 3 times that for the code if there's no... So that's ethical, but it's not top dollar, and it doesn't represent the value. You know, people got to look at, well, what's the value? If it's worth 30% of the whole product, then, you know, that's not fair, but they don't care. They just want to pay for the code, right? And they'll pay for not having to code it themselves. So that's the way Microsoft thinks. You know, coders are commodities, and they'll just, you know, get it done as cheaply as possible and keep as much as profit for themselves. And that's not unethical. That's just American capitalism, you know?
And is Microsoft today still one of your biggest clients, if not the biggest client?
Well, yeah, Unilock's the patent, the 216 patent, which is that main patent, it actually expired in 2016. So there is some residual of that because there's another 10 patents that kind of go over a period after that. So, but Microsoft, the deal's done with them, but you know, there's still residual income going to Unilock for that. But people really don't know that I haven't sold any stock with Unilock, and we doesn't pay dividends because we're always in litigation. One of the downsides of having won against Microsoft is everybody gang together and started what's called PTABs, Patent Tribunal, something or other, and they actually use the masses to try and find ways to nullify a patent, and then they attack the patent office to get your patents nullified. And so that became popular because of what happened with Unilock, and people started ganging up together to stop what they call non-trading, non-practicing entities, NPEs. But we're not non-practicing. I've been
That's sort of getting into the world of patent trolling, is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
people who get
patent
patents
trolls.
They get a patent for the sole purpose of suing.
Yeah. And the thing about Unilock is that Craig did go on to use the skills, like they did end up acquiring other patents to, you know, use their skills, because it ended up that an internal law firm working out how to get law firms from outside to do different cases became an art form in its own right. But I, you know, basically left when my patents were starting to slow down, and I've been a full-time inventor ever since.
So speaking of the patents, like when you first patented the floppy disk model back then to 2016, a lot of technology has advanced. How was that patent relevant over the period when you've now got internet unlocks and demos and all that sort of stuff? How did the relevancy of that patent back then stay current?
So the patent actually didn't talk about the communication model. It talked about the locking of a serial number to a unique fingerprint for a machine. And all those things didn't change when the internet came.
So if you had said the communication model, would that have thrown that patent out?
No, because what you do is in patents, you'll see what's called the claims section. And so you separate out different components into individual claims. So if claims get superseded or dropped out, the other claims are still in place. So in the end, the main claim was number 19 in the 216 patent. That was the one that, withstood everything, all the battles.
Yeah.
Now
with Unilock, if I heard correctly, so in 2016, that original patent expired. Is that correct? So is with Unilock now, has that patent now changed, and you're still?
No. There's a series of patents that I invented for Unilock after 2003. So like they gave me a job. How can you stress test a CPU and use that as a fingerprint? How can you? Well, they didn't actually tell me. They just said, we want 10 patents that relate to this field and go off and sit in a park and come up with some magic. That's what happened. But I actually did that.
Where is Unilock today as a business?
Yeah, it is an arm of a larger business in the IP field, but it's still a standalone. I still own the shares that I've always owned in it.
And it's still being run in Irvine?
Yeah, the main office is in Texas now for that company, and I made a vow when we got successful that I was first in, I'd be last out. So unless we get a major acquisition, or unless if they go public, I'll be happy to exit out of that. But Kaz and I've made enough for us to be really comfortable. Every time we make over a certain ceiling, we made an arrangement to give funds to a cause that we both support, that we don't talk about. But the idea is that we don't personally have the goal of the funding. Like I have a few million in investment in prototypes of inventions. They're all waiting for me to get my act together and turn them into businesses. But you can only really do that responsibly at a certain rate. So sometimes it's 1 a year, sometimes it's 4 a year that I'll roll out. Because
these are your inventions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do help other people a lot with it, but that's only Friday mornings. Like we had to move 2 people for this morning that were standing in line to get help. We had to move them to next week. But the idea is that you don't get 2 episodes of Australian Story and have 2 or 3 million Australians looking at it and just go, oh, that's great PR. I'll just take that and put it in my pocket. No, you got to work out some way to make it give back to the Australians that spent 3/4 of an hour listening to your story.
We spoke, you guys don't know, but Rick and I had a chat on the phone, and maybe you could articulate that a little bit about that piece, because I found that very refreshing, your view on that. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about your feeling around that and how you support entrepreneurs.
Well, it's just that you're really conscious of how the difference between entrepreneurs in the States and inventors here, because you guys are all very entrepreneurial, and that is, a certain characteristics of some Australians, but most Australians are pretty low-key, and they're not really entrepreneurial. But there's a high percentage of them that are tinkerers. And so you get in this situation where everybody's a bit retiring about, their inventions and everything, and everybody hears about it because they're always talking to their family members about it. In fact, if you look at the readership, the watching dynamics of the 2 episodes, it would start out at about, 300,000, 600,000 people, and then it'd go up to past, 1.2 million people because of word of mouth, people saying, ringing up uncles and brothers and,
the crazy tinker and the
cousins,
ideas man in the family.
they finding each other, And so it's a real low-key thing to do that. So the entrepreneurial side of it is different. In the States, they celebrate wins. In Australia, if you have a big win, they like you to keep it to yourself. After the first, they'll let you celebrate for a couple of weeks, and then after that, you better pull your horns in, And so,
But you now make time because it's kind of an example of how this came to be. I leave 3 or 4 little gaps in my calendar each week just for people on the way up to come have a chat. And it was only 4 weeks ago that Sock fought, he came, he contacted me and said, can we catch up for a coffee? And I said, sure. We had 15-minute coffee just where we had a coffee before we did the pod here today. and then he mentioned you're a mentor.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard of you. And then I emailed Chris over here, your right-hand man, not expecting to get a reply, to be honest. I read your website. I was like, how have I not heard this? And within 20 minutes, Chris emails and says, yeah, here's Ric's number, give him a call next week. And then we were on the phone. You picked up, and that, I think, is super old school. And I think it's really valuable to still just make little gaps for those listening that have got something to add value. Create a Calendly link, open your diary for people on the way up just to have little meetings. Because if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be here with you now, and our audience wouldn't get to hear this story. I wouldn't get to make the great connection between you guys.
Yeah.
It's just so good. And you never know, at the end of your life, you'll look back on people like Sockforth and these other people along the way that you've helped in a really meaningful way. It means the world to get FaceTime with somebody like you.
And it's so important not to sit in judgment of them. You know, I tried to do a thing called the Inventors Roadshow, you know, kind of like Antiques Roadshow, but with inventions, and having people lined up and, you know, showing you inventions and then picking the top 5 to kind of like try and move through, but just giving people some feedback about whether it should be a multi-person company, or it should be self-employed, or it should be a weekend hobby, just to help them and encourage them, you know.
Ideas are fragile, right? Steve Jobs said this. They're super fragile.
Yeah.
They need to be supported and nurtured.
But also Australians are so retiring with that, and the fact that they really don't like being labelled as an inventor, but they really are inventors. You know, get over yourself. You are an inventor. That's what I was talking about with those guys in the Motor Winding Association. That you just, if there's an opportunity to wave your flag and say, "Hey guys, I'm here to kind of be, you know, give you some feedback and give you some help," that you know, you do that, and people do find you. So, like in the first year, like it's up over 650 now. Yeah, about 650 people now.
That you've had one-on-one.
Help them with either given them an outline of how to do their patent. I've actually written the draft of their patent for them, or given them advice on their actual.
And this is all free of charge.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, if you start trying to get involved with the business side of it, you have to do all of those decisions, which is discouraging for someone who's trying to invent. So, like, I give you one example. A lady had worked out how to stop elderly from rolling out of bed. So when people go into old folks' home for the first time, they go from a double bed where they're slept on one side their whole life into a single bed, and they roll over in night and they fall off the bed. And the number one problem with breaking hips is people falling out of bed. So she put pool noodles in under the bed sheet, right? And she wanted my help to work out how to solve that problem. And it was so important to me, irrespective of its financial situation. So as an entrepreneur, I'm kind of going, two pool noodles and inserts for bed sheets, like, stuff it. I'm gonna give her all the support I can get for her, right? But it's really hard because she just thinks, you know, there's 4 million people in this situation in Australia that may benefit from it, you know, between hospitals and you know, old folks' homes. And so it's you can't be in a position of judgment with that. You can't do the normal entrepreneurial evaluation. You just got to be a supportive inventor and help them through the process. And also try and curb their expectations, because when they listen to the American entrepreneurial drive that comes from the West Coast, they kind of think everything's going to turn into a multi-million-dollar opportunity. And it's really important for inventors to solve the problem and think about all of that if and when it comes, you know. And that's actually part of the reason why I got anywhere, is because I didn't think about the immensity of the whole thing. I just, you know, decided got to stick up for my decision and stick with it and grin and bear it.
And so you do that every Friday morning at Byron in a cafe. You help out 2 people every Friday morning.
Mostly Zoom now, because they're all over the place.
Yeah.
But at first it used to be people would just turn up and there'd be like, you know, 4 or 5 people sitting in waiting for a time, and I'd booked 3 already. In the morning it's maximum about 3, but I've done as much as 10.
How long is this wait list? Jesus.
Oh, it got out to about 12 weeks at one stage.
Jeez, I'm surprised it's not 12 years.
Yeah, it's kind of every now and then I'll stop for a while because of, you know, other things happening, and I just don't have any flexibility. So, you know, I have travel to Sydney. I'll never do it if I'm travelling. So, you know, people have to be ready for it to, you know, move. But I actually do quite a bit internationally too. So, you know, I don't know how people get it from overseas.
A few repeat offenders. We've got Chris sitting off to the side, which is fantastic. Feel free to chime in.
That's the philanthropic side with your time. And then you said just before that maybe you'll launch 1 to 4 products a year. What's the day in the life of Ric Richardson look like from Monday to Thursday to be able to launch the businesses that, you know, may or may not have the chance of success? I'm much more happy on a project basis if I actually try and get a routine. Also because of health problems, and also you know, different priorities with my girl and everything. I tend to be full on, or sometimes fluffing around and having Chris cover my backside for me. So. Like at the moment, we've got a publicity cycle going through, and it's a pretty serious project that we have on. So it's like I'm right at my limit of pace at the moment. I'd like to be a little bit more comfortable, so that if I've started at 6 o'clock in the morning and gone pretty hard till 2, I want to be able to have a flim-flam afternoon and not have anybody, you know, that demanding a call from me, and I'll push people off.
Do you actually work from that van, or is that like a pass?
Yeah, no.
You do. You still do.
No, I for a lot of my conference calls, I got a company in Texas and a company in one in Dallas and another one in Phoenix, and they're both 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock in the morning. And they're pretty draining because they're both at the really early stages. So, and it's pretty intense. After that, I really should go and have a swim or something, you know. But
so you cruise down the beach.
It usually is. And then there's cafes. We're at Lennox Cafes twice a week with him. We go down there and act as if we're working. But but it's generally keeping the businesses working. So my model is I invent something, I prove it virtually, do a virtual proof of concept, then I do the provisional filing, then I'll do a prototype that is only good enough to show to somebody who's informed in the industry, and then that's when I get my validation done. And then if the validation doesn't fall over and I don't look like an idiot, then I start thinking about a bit of publicity for it to see if there's, you know, somebody besides Rick thinks it's interesting. And then I do a business plan where my goal is to find a business co-founder. It's not about trying to get money, it's about finding a business co-founder. So most of my companies start at about a 10 mil valuation. That's at incorporation. And then and I expect my co-founder to be a full business partner at that time. And then our first investor is coming in at a 10 mil valuation, Australian or more. And if the project survives all of that, then I'm pretty intense with that company for the next year or so, but then slows down because, you know...
From an advisory capacity, you mean? So you're having meetings saying to the executors...
It's mainly, you know, dragging me in to, you know, prove that this is real and the guy who invented it is really... It's not a figment of their imagination.
Okay, so it's not from the business operations as much as it is
no,
the technology.
I'm no good at that.
Yeah.
I really am no good at that.
Yeah.
Like, I've only ever fired 3 people in my life, and 2 of them I actually found other people to hire them and paid for the first 3 months without telling them because I wanted them to be scalped. And then one of them found out about it and got really upset with me because they had no idea. But I just hated the idea of the business pivots, and I hate the idea of letting them down. The only girl that I fired with cause had really been a slob, you know. So she really
it is the
deserved it.
worst thing in business is firing people. I think
Yeah.
it's never ever gets easy unless you're an asshole.
And you know, when you are a startup business or a, you know, high tech pivoting a lot, it's such a big responsibility to take on, you know, someone like you can get a really great coder who just doesn't know this field. You know, at the moment I'm doing a lot in AI. I've got a great general engineer. He's you know, stepped up to do some AI stuff. It turns out it's a lot easier than we thought. But, you know, like I never know which way the project's going to go. You know,
I was going to ask you, you just said the recent one's AI. What was it predominantly tech, all your inventions these days after the Unilock?
Well, technology is a broad thing. Like it can be, you know, like anything from ship design, which I came up with the ship design for Andrew Forrest to help them get their ships into Port Hedland. It's pretty shallow. It didn't go anywhere, but he wanted me to try and solve the problem. I had a go at it until the pilot of the port actually said that my contraption would take up too much space sideways in the headland at Port Hedland. But there's another one I just started really honing in on in the last 2 years, which is shark detection using Lidar, green Lidar. Mm-hmm. So I'll have a go at any problem, but it's all technology.
Yep.
If you try and solve it with you know, biology or some other thing, it's just too touchy dealing with humans. But if it involves, you know, a mechanism or some engineering or, you know, software or new tech, you know, I'll have a go at all kinds of things. You know,
I'm curious. I got 2 questions. One is, how many inventions / patents do you actually have?
well, inventions and patents are 2 different things.
Yeah. So
right?
basically, so how many inventions do you think that you've created, and how many patents do you have?
Well, there's about 200 patents.
That you have filed.
They're in Ric Richardson's name, and a few of them are joint with somebody else because I didn't do every claim in the invention.
Yep.
So I just did one the other day in the AI space, and 30% of it came from an idea of one gentleman. But in practice, I thought out the other 60%. And the thing about patents is that the claims dictate who the inventors are. And if you can't honestly say that you invented each individual claim, then you can't be the sole inventor of that patent. So it's not just about getting credit for it. It's about legally who is actually the person that came up with the idea and being able to prove that you did.
Okay.
So,
and sorry, one more, James. And secondly, out of all your patents or inventions, what's the craziest or funniest or one that you think you'd have over the years that would be interesting to some of the viewers?
Well,
Chris is laughing.
The hardest one by far has been the shark patent, the shark invention. I had the mayor of Byron Bay for lunch. We had lunch together. His name's Richardson too. So, everybody thought we were cousins. So, when I came in, they'd say, "Oh, your cousin's here," and we loved that. So I asked him when he went into office, what would you like to see fixed? And I thought it would be some bureaucratic, administrative thing. And he said, we just had a gentleman die in the surf, just down from a cafe that we both know and love. And he said, "Rick, how hard can it be?" And it is so hard. Sharks are so hard to detect. And it's not just about trying to do something to stop them. It's about seeing them in the surf. You don't see them until they're right on you, right? So, I spent about 120 grand failing because sharks don't have air bladders in them, so it's very hard to see them in sonar. And what people don't realise is that sharks actually do sit inshore. So at Lennox, they actually come in next to the rocks and then into the gutter between the beach and the first sandbar. So they go up the gutter for 7 kilometres up to Broken Head, right? And so they'll sit that whole distance in that gutter, and it's almost impossible to put sonar in there because sonar won't penetrate the bubbles in the coast, right inshore. So it's just like, what are you going to do? It was, so I, looked at $15,000 transponders and a floating mechanism that sat in the surf, a metre underneath the surf so that it could, because sharks actually travelled about a metre under the water. And, I've just, one thing after another wouldn't work and just spent, tens of thousands of dollars. And then found out that the guys from the DPI, the Department of Primary Industry, really great team, gave me all their internal research and said, "Nah, Rick, assuming that you're going to get them with sonar is just not going to work." So I tried putting scanners across perpendicular from the beach to watch the shadows go past in the gutters, and they didn't work because the sand covers the sensors all the time, and they're always moving around. It was just more depressing, and I'm kind of going, I've got software on 2.5 billion machines. It's solved this immense problem, and it's nothing compared to how complicated flaming sharks are. And then then I stumbled across the CSIRO, the CSIRO were using green Lidar to detect growth of coral in the Great Barrier Reef. So they have these expensive UAVs that sit overhead, and they can measure to a couple of millimetres growth in high scan rates of coral. And so I'm going, how far can it penetrate? And I'm thinking, might be able to see sharks with that. So I rang up the guys at CSIRO, and they go to, they say, "It's not going to work, Rick, because you're aiming out into the ocean. It's not going to bounce back. You need perpendicular, or you need to reflection to pick it up. You don't understand, Rick." And I went, "Come on, guys, just see what happens, right?" And that's part of being an inventor, is just see what happens. So they took it to a swimming pool and blow me down. They aimed it at the far end, and they started seeing things, debris on the bottom of he said it was surprisingly high resolution, and they go, "Okay, we're going to take it to the beach." And so they, down in Hobart, I think it was, they took it to the beach, and they could see everything in the surf. So I knew that they, had solved the problem. So I actually think that that's enough to verify my assumptions. And so the patent for that is on its way. Cool. But, that was, it's up to about 145 grand worth of experiments blown up that, might actually work now.
Well, every seaside city in the world doesn't want a shark attack, right? So,
And the problem is it's a pretty loveless thing, though, too, because there's not a big commercial opportunity. It's just, so you can't really go out there and get big sponsorship for the idea. It's more about just doing the right thing. So in the end, it was the mayor of Byron Bay who could actually turn around and afford maybe two $15,000 devices and, some budget for people to go and check the devices to make sure they're working. But, that's about the limit of their budget. So the entrepreneurial side of it is a different question altogether. But as an inventor, I'll give it a shot. Give it a shot, have a go.
Very clear differentiation here between the entrepreneur and the inventor.
Yeah.
And you very clearly sit in the inventor camp. And I guess that's a thing that trips people up when they hear a $530 million story. They think entrepreneur, but actually it's not really.
No, and it's also partnering with really great business entrepreneurs. Like Craig is an entrepreneur. Like he sold his first $20 million business when he was 17, and he was the junior pro surf champion of the US in the same year.
Wow.
Right? So, like, I've stood on the shoulders of quite a few incredible people.
One of those underachievers, eh?
But he's so Australian. He always wears thongs or sneakers and shorts and T-shirts. So two kind of Australian-looking slobs in a boardroom in Irvine with guys coming down from Hollywood who we were interviewing to be CEOs of the company who didn't work out in the end. Craig became the CEO. But, it's like we went in one time, that classic thing happened where the guy came in and just sat there waiting for the founders to turn up. Thought we were engineers.
I love that I'm sitting here today and you're wearing Crocs. It's awesome.
I meant to hide that.
You mentioned that. You mentioned the AI before, and it's all the buzzword at the moment. I'm sure you've been around it a lot earlier than most. I mean, how's that changed your perspective on being an inventor since the implementation of AI across probably your ideas?
It's funny, if you get into something really early, you can get burnt by it, and so you're kind of negative about it until it catches up on you. So I actually, back when the film Her came out.
How good was that?
I'd been in the middle of some really heavy AI research and was experimenting with my assistant back then, a lady that has worked with me for years, and I was using an automation system and FileMaker, if you've heard of that. I was using Dragon Naturally Speaking, an AI engine, a deep learning AI engine, and FileMaker for automation, and it was taking about 9 hours to process 3 hours of dialogue, and really struggling to work out what was going on, and it just became a full-time job, and I didn't know whether we had anything worthwhile doing. And then, Chat GPT, the first couple of vision, I go, wait until they get their act together. Then 3.5 came out, and now 4. It's just spectacular stuff, and it is so incredibly powerful. What AI does for somebody like myself, I don't have to remember anything. I can ask stupid questions. That's a big part of being an inventor, is being able to ask stupid questions. And asking AI stupid questions is not a problem. If it says, comes back with a really obvious answer, you go, oh, duh. I'm so happy.
You're not being judged by anybody.
I'm not.
That'll be the next. That'll be ChatGPT 6.
Okay.
Like, listen, dumbass. I'm busy over here.
Okay. I've got to tell you a story. One of the projects that I had to do was for Walmart in the States. We were looking at how to do unlockable DVDs using dies, where you actually put a die on the disc that would turn, if it got baked at a certain temperature with a certain light, it would turn transparent. So it's normally you couldn't see through it. So it would stop losses of DVDs, right? So the scientist that is the expert on that, he's a Nobel laureate, is in University California, Irvine, UCI. And I went to... Our way of solving big problems is just to go and find the best guy you can in the field, give them $3,000 to $5,000 for half a day to a full day of their time, and see if you can break the back of a problem. So we had to ask him about lasers and fluorescence and about that. So it was basically me and this Nobel laureate, and so I did a bit of research before I went in. And then when I sat down with him, the first 20 minutes he's going, Rick, this is in any encyclopedia, the questions you're asking me. And it's like your ears go red pretty quick when you're sitting with a Nobel laureate and you realise that they really think you're wasting your time and they're getting a bit irritated with you. But within about an hour, you kind of like start to get on a thread of something that's starting to work. And then I'd have a knack of doing deep diving with him. So I was asking questions for him to verify, and then he was hesitating more in the answer, and then we were exploring things faster and we were moving quicker, and we'd actually solved the problem within about an hour and a half.
I find it fascinating that you can get the meeting,
Oh,
So
well...
Go ahead. Is that because you're Ric Richardson and they know the story? Or
No, this is happening way before the notoriety. You just have to... Like $3,000 will get you... you will get you...
A long way.
Yeah, you can get in. And the fact that you're not being presumptuous with him, you're saying... Like, for example, with Dr. Renzipis, he didn't charge us because after the first 2 hours, I went into solving his problem and working on his, and I helped him how to do his provisional for an invention that he came up with. And he was a bit shocked because I worked out over about 3 days what he was doing without him telling me what his secret was. And he was a bit taken back. But when you're an inventor that has got up to speed on how the process works, your problem solving moves so fast that it looks quite scary to people, So, and also you have to be quick to have a thick skin and put up with people, asking you, what the hell are you asking me this for? You can read this in Wikipedia. You're wasting my time. But if you can get past that and start to deep dive with them, you can move so incredibly fast. So I don't know if you've used ChatGPT yet.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But if you really start to ask it questions and deep dive with it, you'll be surprised how quickly you get generic answers, then you get more specific, and then it answers more specific, and then you're questioning it, and then you're arguing with it, and then you're deep diving, and you're becoming quite an expert with it if you've ever had that experience. And that's what it's like with me all the time, at the moment I'm solving a problem with ransomware and learning about hospitals and all of their ransomware issues and about how databases work. So I'm really boning up quickly and talking to experts in databases, and they're going, how long have you been in the database industry? And I'm going, 3 months.
This is with Deadbolt?
Yeah.
Deadbolt?
Yeah.
I think, we've had that experience recently, and I just want to drop a note here for entrepreneurs listening to this. We're developing a product at the moment we're at the early stages of securing a patent for, and we know nothing. Eric's an investor, but we know nothing about the technology layer. We have the general idea, and we know it's been done, but it hasn't been patented. Something similar. We took it to an inventor, someone like you, and as an entrepreneur, because you're so used to the commercial world where everybody wants their piece, and the entrepreneurs are very self-centered minded. This inventor lives on a farm in Adelaide. He's self-sustaining, grows all his fruit and veggie. And when we told him what we're trying to do, he's like, leave it with me for a couple of days. He came back with like a 30-page PowerPoint deck with diagrams and the science and how he could patent it and the whole thing. And this guy's got some patents already as well. And we were just blown away at how forthcoming this person was because he wanted to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Very different mindset to entrepreneurs that are all about the money and the percentages. And he wasn't living that life. He just went back to growing his tomatoes. And we're now doing a deal with him commercially to recognise the value in his contribution. But I think that's really valuable, having that mindset of yours, which is to don't be afraid of the problem. Remain open to the possibility that it can be solved. A lot of people just rule themselves out, don't have this or I don't have that, rather than using tools and going to the effort and becoming curious.
Yeah, so as an inventor, my job isn't finished until the largest number of people possible are using it, right?
Wow.
But my actual job as an inventor stops the day that I have a business partner who says, yes, I know what to do with this thing, and I just need you to make sure that it turns into a product that reflects what you're talking about, right? So the difference between an entrepreneur and an inventor is all about the problem, irrespective of the financial viability of the problem. So, for example, I will keep working until the problem's solved and the top 3 to 5 issues that are the reason that there is that problem are solved, right? But I will always then go through at least the motions of doing the business model canvas, right? Which is a necessary evil. But until you actually know what your customers' problems are, until you know how your technology needs to be productized for it to do, you've really got very little chance of expecting that to be used by the X million people that are, out there that could possibly use it. And when you're inventing in all these different fields, you just have to suck it up because, 1 minute I'm working in database technology in hospitals and the next minute I'm working in,
Shark technology.
Yeah, shark technology. Or then somebody's asking me I've solved quite a few problems for Andrew Forrest. It was fantastic experience working with him. He is a real incredible, interesting character. He's got such a strong personality that it sometimes overshadows his just goodness as a man, just as a person. But it was wonderful working with him because he's so project-centric. But he also is a very keen businessman. So it's great as a problem solver to not be burdened by the responsibility of making it, fiscally work. And that's part of the problem of being an inventor is your psychology is different to that of a entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs gather people together and get the combined effort of a bunch of people to get a problem solved. Inventors find the collaborative thing really hard because the more people you have to explain to, the less time you spend solving the problem. So I only pull in the experts that solve specific problems and I'm piecing it together. And if somebody can tell me I'm doing the wrong thing, great. But it's not it's not a committee. If I'm solving a problem, it's me solving the problem. It's not about ego either. It's about moving fast and having all of these jumbled things in my head, and by the time it actually coalesces, not having to do that for 5 people.
Yeah, it's the old saying, a camel is a horse designed by a committee. I thought you might enjoy that one. For those listening, if you don't know who Andrew Forrest is, Fortescue Metals, particularly a lot of Aussies probably have heard of Andrew, but overseas people may not have. Another incredible Australian story that I've followed for a while. I'm sure many have. So what I'd like to ask you about, we've been going for coming up to 2 hours.
It doesn't feel like that. Sorry about that, guys.
No, do not apologise. I'm happy to keep going for a minute, but I would really love to know, what are you most excited about now? And I'd also, secondarily, so you can process it, what messages are you really passionate about as an Australian now that's moved from a young inventor entrepreneur? You're aging, you're seeing the changes in Australia. Mm-hmm. What do you think we're losing as a nation? And what do you think we need to?
You've got a few things there in that.
Well, let's start with the. Which one of those questions is most interesting to you? The Australia stuff, or what are you most passionate about?
Well, there is the big picture stuff.
I'd like you to hear about that because I'd love you to get on your soapbox for a minute and hear what you think, because I think your perspective, having worked and lived in the US, gone to war with, capitalism, really. Yeah. You've got a very unique experience set, and you've met a lot of very unique people.
Well, actually, it's interesting that you brought up Australia too, because that to me really highlights some uniquely Australian things about it. One, it only happened because it's a sport event, and Australians are so competitive, and they love it when they go after the big guys and win, right? So that's one thing. Everybody got behind it. I was out in the surf in Narrabeen when that happened, and everybody was just enjoying that win. It was such a big moment. I think it was 82 that happened. But it was the combination of three things that are uniquely Australian. One, a team on a boat with a really good captain, and then behind the team was Ben Lexon, who, wasn't a big money guy, not a self-promoter. His attitude is, I'm not going to let you tell me what a keel should look like. I'm going to look at the rules and work out what I can get away with, which is very Australian. And then he came up with a design that everybody said, oh, you're cheating. But, too bad. It worked fantastic. And then you had, an investor in Bondi who actually thought beyond pure capitalistic, values, and went into solving this problem. And I would just so intrigued by the idea of trying to turn invention into a national sport, because Australians really love that, but they don't celebrate the individuality that, happens in the States. Like if our footy players all had rings from winning premierships, and they wore these great big rings on their fingers, and they all lived in houses at Vaucluse or whatever, Australians would very quickly get tired of them, Whereas in the States, they're celebrated. Good on you, mate. But here, if you keep going on about your premiership win 3 weeks after it's over, you're kind of like, sorry, that's not on. And so inventors are in a different situation. A lot of the West Coast models for entrepreneurship don't work here. And you guys are pretty unique, and you probably gravitate to each other, out of, say, if you walked into a pub, you'd find each other pretty quickly. But the average Australian kind of is not real against any self-promotion. And entrepreneurialism, the American style, is very self-promoting, right? So you're behind the eight ball with that. So I'm really interested in a mechanism that treats inventors as non-entrepreneurs, make sure that you find business partners, like what you've done in reverse of what you've done. You found an inventor to solve your problems. I actually, as an inventor, find business partners to get my projects rolled out, and I treat them as partners. I don't expect them to come in for 10% of the company. I expect them to take over the responsibility of the company, and we together make money, or else we get diluted together from funding. So in my ultimate exit, it's a third, a third, a third. A third to the founders, a third to the execution team, and a third to the finance people. So that's the fair thing to do. So, but going forward for Australia, I really think that a lot of the techniques that the West Coast has, or Austin does for entrepreneurialism, doesn't work here. Got to find a model that actually enables that. So I will have stand-up arguments with people who think, what's wrong with inventors? They just need to be helped. But Australian inventors, they like to think that they're entrepreneurial, but they're not. So, our friend from Sockford, he's quite entrepreneurial, but I'd say he's more of an inventor than entrepreneur. He's solving a problem.
Yeah.
But you should have seen the love he had about, his socks when he... I've actually seen some incredible moments where people are just so inspired about what they're doing, but it's not an entrepreneurial... they're not looking for the business opportunity. They're looking to have solved a problem that's been a real thorn in their side, and they think of the 100 or 200 people they know that it's going to solve the problem for. Entrepreneurs see opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. We talk about, we teach entrepreneurs, and one of the models that we created was there's 3 parts to every business. There's idea, capital, and execution. And if you've got a great idea, which is the inventor domain, capital is just the money you need to make it happen. And then somebody's got to be a killer executor.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like in your case, you're probably the idea and the capital, and you just need the executor. But
no, because I tend to always use outside money for projects, simply from the perspective that I did a few projects where I was the bank, and the problem with that is that everyone thinks you're a bank from then on. So I actually, and also there's no credibility in the invention until other people buy in on it, right? So like if I'm with Deadbolt, it's getting rolled out in Phoenix, at the moment. And so if I go out there and say, hey, I'm going to pull in, 5 mil and try and make something happen, the real test of whether that's successful is not going to happen in the first 5 mil. It's going to happen, the next mil after that it's raised. So you're just putting off the real validation test.
product market fit, yeah.
Yeah. So, and the inventor is the worst person to be pulling the strings in that situation,
Yeah. Did you have a question? I was going to just say about just that lessons to young people coming up, like what do you observe with the changes in our country? We all love Australia. We love this part of the world, particularly Southeast Queensland and far north.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think we need to bring back or not lose as we evolve as a nation?
Well, the big thing is what I was just talking about is that you have to admit there are tinkerers out there that are not going to be calling themselves inventors, and making them, go through the come out party.
We've got to capture that value, right?
Right.
Like, Australia's not been good at capturing the value that comes out of the minds of its citizens. Would you say that?
Yeah, but the thing is, I think the trick is for them to see, to understand that important principle of partnering with people that are not your strengths,
Yes.
right? And because there's a few things with being an Australian. One, you think everybody's the same. I was in my 40s before I realised that I was a really good inventor, right? Because I'd invented my whole life. I thought that everyone invented. I had no idea that they didn't, right? You're not really that aware of how everybody else thinks. That's the way you grew up. So, and Aussies really fight the tendency to think they're special. So it makes it much worse, for somebody who is got a special capability. And it's really important when you do discover that you are really talented in some space, that you put that in context, that you're really pretty useless in others. So, my wife is used to me not doing anything around the house. It's not because I shouldn't do it. I should do it. But she lets me off the hook because there's other ways that I'm quite, I'm quite gifted. So she lets me get away with those things because I get to concentrate on what I'm good at. Like she's seen me struggle about a flat battery. change a tyre, forget about it, I'm ringing the NRMA, you know. That's amazing. And yet I'll understand the mechanics of it and I can explain it backwards. But, you know, actually have the tool set, know where everything is, all of that kind of stuff. It sounds like you're just a slob, but the reality is that if your mind's got, hey, I've done 4 AI patents in the last month, I'm rolling out, I'm doing publicity next week, I'm doing this and doing that, you don't squibble about it. You're just thankful that there's people around who know what you really like, you know, and don't pick on you too much for being a weirdo.
I think that's so valuable, isn't it? You know, because so often I think another thing that Aussies are sort of guilty of is we try to do things on our own perhaps too much instead of being collaborative in our approach.
Yeah.
I found when I lived in America, I would go, when I first moved there, an investment banker came up to me and said, hey, I'm Tom, you know, I'm from San Diego. You know, you've just moved here. How can I help you? Like, what do you need now that you're here? And I was like, wow, like I don't think I'd ever heard that in Australia.
No.
He was like, how can I help you? And who do you need to meet? And who do you need to get together with? And then I moved into a WeWork co-working space, and it was super collaborative about, you know, not keeping it all to yourself so much, but realizing there's a big global market out there. Let's collaborate together.
Yeah.
And go on. I think that's a really healthy thing that I learned while I was there.
Yeah.
And I think Aussies, if you recognize, yes, I am good at this and I'm really bad at that, and then finding somebody who's really good at your weaknesses instead of just the bloke that you know at the pub or your best mate that you've had a laugh. There's a difference between a mate and somebody who's competent.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much IP that it just doesn't ever get realised because people underestimate what they're great at, overestimate what they're bad at, and just don't meet in the middle.
Yeah, so you got all these kids who are tinkerers. Like we had a Inventors club at Byron Bay High for a long time, and there'd be 30 kids turn up every time I did it every 6 weeks. And we had kids that were building 2 shell houses that where the outside shell lifted up in the summer to give more headroom and cool the temperature down in the house, allow the hot air to rise higher, and then shut down so make it easier to heat. And so, you know, he did a full-on designs like that, and I'm trying to help him, you know, work out the design. Another kid did one of the first electric plug-in motors for BMX bikes. You know, like another one did a foot stop door opener so that you could open up a door without having to touch you step on it to open up a door. And there was this girl, this 12-year-old girl who invited me home to her parents' place to show me her invention. And I thought, she's going to show me a Barbie iPhone case or something like that. You know, I didn't want to have high expectations. I want to be encouraging. The dear girl, I come in and she goes, there's this material that changes colour with temperature, and I want to use it as a shower mat so that you can tell the temperature of the water when you're in the shower. And I said, why? What's the problem? And he said, my mum has multiple sclerosis. She can't feel the temperature, and if she has a shower, there has to be someone else in the house because she can't tell whether it's burning her or not.
Wow.
It makes me emotional now thinking about it, you know, and I was just so proud of her. And I thought, shut up, Rick, Barbie schmarby, And so here she is doing this thing, and she was 12, right? She's down in RMIT at the moment, but, she's her mum's there talking about something really private for their family. I was so very proud of her, and the technology, it's a bit of a stretch now to do it, but it's still, there's a possibility I will do something with it to make sure it happens. But I was just taught such an incredible lesson then, about people solving problems. There's nothing about entrepreneurism. It's all about just solving the problem for someone she loved.
Humanity, yeah.
You know?
That's incredible.
Who do you look up to? Who inspires you as an inventor? I heard through the grapevine there was one person, but
Yeah.
who's that one person that you put on a pedestal when it comes to?
I bet I could guess.
Yeah, I think you can guess.
What, Elon Musk?
I don't know. Is that someone?
No, I am really impressed by Elon Musk, but I'd hate to be him
Yes.
just because of his drive is so myopic that I wonder how much of a normal person's life he's missing out on.
Yeah.
But it's still like very impressive what he's doing. I love Edison's setup, the way he thought, and the way he drove for practicality, but he fell into the trap of being myopic about the commercial application. So, he did incandescent globes, but then he was determined to make DC the standard, which meant you had to have a power station every 5 blocks, right? AC is like so much better. Tesla worked for him. Tesla is an incredible mind too, but he is like 99%. Once the problem's solved, he doesn't want to make it happen beyond that. And if the thing never gets used by 2 people after he's finished the problem, he really didn't care, right? So there's a combination of those two that I like. The Edison story more so for me because I've experienced some of the magic things that happened to Edison that I've read about that happened to him. Like, for example, when he discovered he calls it a discovery, not an invention, the phonograph, he had his chin on a spiral Morse code reader, a telegraph machine, and it was getting charges coming down the line, and it would speed up, go to 12 volts after being on 5 volts, and speed up. And he thought he heard voices, and he worked out that the dots on the spiral device had turned into a waveform, and maybe he could do the reverse, go into the speaker and use the speaker to make the dots and duplicate that. So he actually on the spot made a foil roller that with candle wax under it, so that he could heat it up a bit to make the impression, and then it went hard, and then he could play back, and he just said Mary had a little lamb, into it, and played back. And, it was over in 20 minutes, right? From his intuition to having invented the thing and having his guy write the patent, right, for it, right there standing. And it's really incredible. And he said, it was a discovery. It wasn't invention, because he didn't sweat and blood over it, Then he went to the Smithsonian. I think it was the Smithsonian, or it was another place nearby, and he did a demo, got up in front of everybody, said Mary had a little lamb in front of it, and played it back, and no one said anything. There was like 200 people in the audience. No one said anything. Just went silent. And then they just thought he was being a ventriloquist. So they started, poo-pooing him, and then they got this opera singer who was visiting. She was up the back, and she came down, and he recorded her into the thing, and then she was finished, and they said, "You've got to go up the back, stand at the top there, and so we definitely can hear whether you're throwing your voice or anything." And it plays back, and like a third of the audience fainted because they thought that he'd recorded their spirit. They didn't understand the physics of what involved. We're so used to it, but for them, nobody had ever recorded sound before. And everybody in that room thought it was magic. He went from there to the White House, got the president out of bed, and played with it until 1 o'clock in the morning, with the same thing. And that moment where something that's so obvious for him, it was over in 20 minutes, and everybody else thinks it's some kind of mystery. I've had that once with Unilock. I've had it a few times with different inventions, but, with Unilock, I remember going to see the CEO of WordPerfect, and he said, "Nah, what you're doing is impossible." And he said, "And if it works, there must be some kind of fraud involved." And I went, "Really? Oh, I can do a demo for you. You can see it and you can ask any questions you want." So he gets his secretary's machine and, we do the unlock, $35. Thank you very much. And then...
There's a bit of entrepreneur in you, Rick.
$35.
Still get a kick out of it.
And so anyway, then he gets the serial, the unlock code, and then he goes to the next one, puts it in the next computer. And by this time, the secretary was, his secretary was watching him. And she's standing around, and somebody else from the next cubicle came and watched. And he tried to put the serial number in, and he's thinking that someone is on a mobile phone, telling somebody how to manipulate the situation somehow. He thought there was some shenanigans going on, and they were all a Mac shop. So we went to the next one, and by this time about 7 or 10 people were standing around watching him, and he's feeling the heat because it's not happening again, and I'm making another $45. And it went on 4 times before he admitted defeat. But he actually said to me, to my face, "What you're doing is impossible. It's fraud, Rick. You don't understand how serious it is." And I knew what was going on. It was pretty obvious to me. But that moment when you realise that you've done something that, even though they're not technical people, they really can't get their head around how you're doing it.
That feeling must have been quite profound.
Yeah. Like to sit in front of an audience that says you shouldn't have got a patent for software activation. It's really obvious. At the time, it wasn't.
Right, exactly. Hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah.
I think on that note, we're going to have to bring this to a regretful close. I mean, I was just Googling because I was just thinking about that quote as you were talking, which was from Charles Jewell, the Commissioner of the US Patent Office in 1899, where he famously said, "Everything that's ever going to be invented has already been invented." In 1899, which shows you how close-minded people often are.
Yeah.
And how many inventions and patents are still coming to market now, and the population of the world is so much bigger.
Tom Watson said that the world market for computers was going to be 4.
Yes. Yeah. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And there's famous video of Steve Ballmer laughing at the iPhone and when it came out. And we saw that recently where he was going, "No, but look, I'm very happy for Steve and Apple, and nobody's ever going to buy this thing at $1,000. We're very happy with our BlackBerry things. Ha, 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 ha." Well, it turns out he had the last laugh there.
Yeah, right.
So, Rick, this has just been one of those interviews. I think it's just an absolute honour to have you here. I know that you would find that very difficult to hear, but Aussies like you make me proud to be Aussie. And I mean that,
Thanks,
I really mean that, because it's such a rare thing to find somebody as accomplished as you, as humble as you, and guys like you are national treasures. Like, we really need to document these stories, because this is the heart of, I think, who we are as a nation.
Thanks, mate. That's very kind.
Yeah, it's a thing that I think young people today, especially me, old people, young people, but if you want a role model and you want to aspire to somebody that you want to feel good about in a world of influencers and Instagrammers, posing and posturing, and then you meet a guy like you that's just all substance. It's a real refreshing experience. So thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
On behalf of all the people listening,
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very grateful.
And thank you, Chris, for setting it up. We really appreciate it as well. So, guys, like we always say, drop a comment below. Let Rick know. Not that he needs the validation, but it is always nice to hear if something that he has said or shared today has reached you and has added value to your life. And, of course, subscribe to the pod, because it helps us get more Ric Richardsons on the pod, because they see that we've got an audience, and If in your case, in Ric's case, he's not here trying to make money, he's here trying to give. And the bigger the megaphone there is, the more appealing it is for somebody who wants to give to come on the show. So please tell your friends, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below and let us know what you thought of today's pod. I know I'm going to be listening to it back many times. There's so much in here. And we're just really stoked. So thanks very much, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
And have a great week, guys.
Thank
Talk to
you.
you soon.
Thank you.
Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.